Hey, what's up guys, Bajheera here. Now for this video, we're checking out a new mobile game called MOBIUS Final Fantasy. And this video is sponsored by Square Enix, so huge shoutouts to them for giving me a chance to check out this game, share it with you guys, and of course be compensated for my time as well. So what we're going to do in this video is basically take you guys through the beginning of the game. And I want to do that for a few reasons. One, to me, MOBIUS Final Fantasy seems extremely story-driven. This is a standalone Final Fantasy adventure, and it was even written by the same guy that wrote Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy X. And the second main reason I want to show you guys the beginning of the game is the tutorial process takes you through a whole lot of what is important about the game, mainly the actual combat system and how to progress in the game as well. MOBIUS Final Fantasy is a turn-based game in which basic attacks generate resources for you that are used for offensive abilities and defensive skills as well. These offensive and defensive skills both operate on an elemental system. So using an earth attack will require a certain amount of earth orbs, same with fire or water or any other element like that. So throughout the course of battle, you will generate these resources with your normal attacks, and you'll be able to use these resources with your other abilities. Now, MOBIUS Final Fantasy also makes use of this elemental system to establish some strengths and weaknesses. So fire is both strong and weak against water, and wind is both strong and weak against earth. But if you use an elemental attack of the same element that your opponent is, it will deal reduced damage to them. The game also makes use of the break system, in which more powerful foes will sometimes have a resistance to damage that you have to attack through in order to deal more fatal damage to their primary health bar. Main attacks alone aren't very effective at reducing an enemy's break gauge, but that's where your special abilities come into play. If you hit an enemy with one of your special attacks, you'll notice that reducing their break gauge with main attacks becomes much easier. And of course, once that break gauge is down, that's the perfect time to hit your opponent with one of your strongest attacks to take them out quickly. Now, throughout the course of the game, you have storyline interspersed with these battle missions. Essentially, your character has found themselves in this sort of limbo, along with a lot of other people as well. And although your memory is definitely not fully intact, you seem to remember your name and also recognize some aspects of your world while being guided by this voice in the sky aptly named Vox. And it also seems that it is your destiny of sorts to become this warrior of light. The process certainly won't be easy, and it does seem that you're up against several other people going for the exact same goal. And apparently who share your name as well. So the exact way that all of this fits in together with the story is not fully revealed to you at this point, but it definitely piques your curiosity. In the beginning of the game, we also meet this big fella who seems to know a little bit more about our world and what's going on in it than we do, and definitely seems like someone that we're gonna have to pay attention to as the storyline progresses. Now, another thing that you can look forward to in between missions is, of course, the character progression. Now, I wouldn't really say that MOBIUS Final Fantasy is a card game, but a lot of the character customization and progression does take place in a system of cards that grant you abilities and level up along with you. In terms of rewards that you receive at the end of the battle, obviously experience points are going to be a big one, but you can also earn cards and what are called skill seeds, which you can use to buy upgrades for your character, like increased health, increased attack power, and even new weapons for your job. Just in case you guys aren't familiar with Final Fantasy, job is basically like your class, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. You also oftentimes receive items at the end of missions as well. So with all this experience and new cards and new items that you've gotten, the tutorial now teaches you a little bit about deck building. And once again, at least in terms of the way I tend to think about card games, MOBIUS Final Fantasy is much more of a story-driven, turn-based combat game that features cards as a way of organizing your abilities and upgrades rather than just being a card game. Now, earlier we talked about how the element system in MOBIUS Final Fantasy was used for your offensive abilities, but there's also a defensive component to this as well, called the element drive. Using the element drive will allow you to raise your resistance against a certain type of element and also make it so that particular element is less likely to spawn from your normal attacks. So when facing a water opponent like we are here, we're going to shield ourselves against water attacks and also remove water elements from being drawn when we use our normal attacks. This means that we're much more likely to to draw elements that are powerful or neutral against our opponent, rather than the elements that are the weakest. So I mentioned earlier a little bit about the skill panel in terms of how you can spend some of the resources that you receive from battling to make your character more powerful. Now these skills will be different depending on which jobs that you've selected, but the interface itself and how it works is pretty much the same across the board. And you can see that you can upgrade your attack, HP, magical attack, defense, things like that. And I felt like I was able to upgrade pretty frequently, at least early on. Now this next feature of the game seems a little bit funny to me because it takes you through the whole process of learning the fairly intricate combat system, and then it gives you the option of auto battle, in which case the battle just plays itself out for you. And obviously this is going to be super convenient when you're just wanting to autopilot your way through some fights, grind some experience, fight some mobs, and progress through the storyline. And speaking of progression, eventually, as you play through the beginning of the game, you get access to your first 2 new jobs. Now, just for the record, I only chose Mage because the tutorial made me. So, once you get to the jobs menu, you'll see that each job has its own unique strengths and weaknesses, both in terms of the cards that you're able to use, the way that your skills develop, and your combat effectiveness. And of course, with each new job that you decide to pick, you also get to build a brand new deck around that job, uniquely catered to its strengths and combat characteristics. Now for your job's new deck, you are going to want to have some beefy cards, and I've talked about your cards upgrading and gaining experience along with you, and Fusion is one of those ways that you're able to make sure that your cards are as powerful as they can be. Now, card fusion takes place along 3 categories: the card level, the skill seeds, and the ability level. When you pick the card that you want to fuse with your original card, it will give you an idea of how likely each statistic category is to upgrade in that fusion. So throughout the course of your adventures, you're definitely going to want to use some of the cards that are less necessary, or at least the ones that you're not going to use in your deck, to bolster the strength of the cards that you do use more often. You can also use the in-game shop to buy extremely powerful cards with items that you will get along your journey. During the course of the tutorial, I was able to unlock an awesome card that's really good for my warrior type character that I decided to play. Of course, the mage was what I had to play during the tutorial, but as soon as I could, I swapped back to Onion Knight to make use of Ifrit, a rare category card that's already level 16 that proved to be an invaluable addition to my deck. Now, one of the last things that you learn about in the combat tutorials are ultimates. Each job has its own unique ultimate, and you fill the ultimate gauge at the bottom of your screen by using those element orbs in either offensive or defensive abilities. Once your ultimate gauge is full, you can unleash it with devastating results. I had a ton of fun playing Mobius Final Fantasy, and I think a lot of people will too. Even if you decide to use the auto combat system, the battles are still fun to watch, and you'll often find yourself thinking of what the correct move will be, and then watching your character perform that exact move on screen. And I think that part of the reason the auto combat system is in the game is, one, like I mentioned before, you're going to be doing a lot of fights, and it makes the grinding process a little bit easier. Two, as I mentioned before as well, this is a standalone Final Fantasy story written by the same guy that wrote Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy X. So if you start playing this game, you're definitely going to feel yourself being pulled along, wanting to pursue the storyline and learn more about it. Third and finally, this game is beautiful, and it's got an amazing soundtrack as well. So just like you might get drawn into the storyline, it's also just a really pleasant experience to kick back and watch this beautiful game run and listen to the awesome music that it has as well. Of course, in between battles, you'll have the option of doing all the customization to your battle deck, upgrading your skills, choosing new jobs, upgrading your cards as well. So there's definitely a component to you setting up your character for battle and then watching how it plays out and watching the story and enjoying the beautiful graphics and sound that the game has to offer. And I think that combination makes for a great mobile game, and I definitely had a lot of fun playing this game. If you want to try out Mobius Final Fantasy, and I recommend that you do, I'll put a link in the description for you to check it out. And that is going to bring us to the end of the tutorial and the end of the video. Once again, huge shoutouts to Square Enix for sponsoring this video. I had a blast playing it, and I'm looking forward to playing more as well. And of course, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to show it some love in the likes and comments, and definitely subscribe for more. I appreciate the support, team, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace!